We're joined now by Anita Fox from the Michigan Department of Insurance and Financial Services. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Let's get right into it and talk a little bit about those images that we saw during that historic flooding in Midland last year. What were you seeing when you saw that?
I saw the suffering that the rest of us saw. We saw people who lost everything, their homes, their possessions. And remember, this was in the middle of a pandemic. And it was tragic all the way around. So I went to a town hall with Attorney General Nessel to talk with the residents of Midland and around the Sanford Dam, and really just a terrible situation for those families. And that's something we never want to see again. We want to make sure that everyone is prepared for in the event of a disaster. And that if they are faced with such kind of tragedy, that they have the proper insurance coverage to cover their belongings and their property.
Are there a lot of myths that exist around insurance as far as it covers flooding? Are there a lot of people who think that they're covered that might not be under the policies that they have?
Yes, that's kind of one of the biggest messages that I can give Michigan residents right now, is that we use the word flood to mean a lot of things. My bathtub flooded, we had a plumbing leak and it flooded my basement. But those things might be covered under your homeowners or your renter's insurance. But a true flood, a disaster like we saw in Midland, will not be covered typically under your homeowners or your renter's insurance or business policies. So if you have an event like that, you have to have flood insurance, a separate kind of coverage. And most people do not know that. And we saw in Midland that many people did not know that and were devastated a second time to find out that they had no insurance coverage.
What would you say to families who think that they don't need that kind of coverage because maybe they don't live near a big body of water or they don't live in a place that would traditionally flood?
Well, say, first of all, we are a water state. There's water everywhere, and there are all kinds of things. And we saw in Midland, it doesn't even have to be a flood from a weather event. It could be a natural disaster. What I would tell anyone is this is the time to ask those questions before you have a disaster. Talk with your insurance agent. There is federal flood insurance. If you go to floodsmart.gov, they can look and find out, what does a policy cost? What are my options? What are my risks? Because you want to think about that. It may be that you make a decision that it's not right for your family, but it should be a choice. You don't want to be standing there and have the devastation and then be talking about a flood policy because it will be too late.
Why is it so important that families have those preparations in place?
It's so important because when you're in the midst of that, and we saw this in Sanford and, in the midst of a pandemic, if you don't have that coverage, you're on your own. And many people didn't have, equity in their homes anymore. Their homes are destroyed, difficult to get a loan. And if you don't have the proper kind of insurance, how are you going to rebuild? How are you going to replace your belongings? Maybe even how are you going to have a place to stay that you can afford while your place is being rebuilt? Insurance can maybe handle those things, but only if you look into it before disaster strikes.
Okay. Anita Fox, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.